Hey, this is Don from Padlock Technologies again with another video. Today, this is going to be a video for my Cisco Secure Firewall or FTD heads if you're, back when the marketing change wasn't Secure Firewall. We're going to talk about Dynamic Attribute Connector, what it is, why you should use it, and kind of the problem it eliminates here. It's a cool feature. Not that many people use it. So let me explain what it is on the whiteboard first, and then we're going to look at it in the lab so I can show you exactly what it looks like. Now in the lab, I'm going to use the public connectors, but there are private connectors as well. But once you see this, a lot of people will probably start using this feature after they watch this video. So let's get to the whiteboard and let me explain it. So in the documentation or whatever, if you want to read this, they really call this, I believe it's CSDAC or Cisco Secure Dynamic Attribute Connector. And what that basically is let's say this is the firewall right here, right? Here's your FTD. And then let's say this is, VMware or something like that. VMware or vCenter. Let's say that. You got some host in there, right? So you have host 10.1.1.1, and now you create a connector to VMware, and then it creates a dynamic object in the FTD, and we're going to call this VM workloads. All right, VM workloads is going to be the dynamic object, and then we'll have I did that the connector over here, so we'll have CSDA over here. So how the workflow would go is, let's say you created another host, and this was 10.1.1.2. When you create that host, what happens is the connector that's in VMware, when you do the syncing, would send an update to CSCD or CSDAC. So that's step number 2. And then what CSDAC would do is tell the FTD, hey, we just added, please add, I was going to say add 10.1.1.2 to VM workloads dynamic object. And what that will do is it will, when that's added, I got to put an FTD over here to the side too. So this is FTD, this is the FMC. I don't know why I said that, FMC, and this is the FTD over here. Sorry. So once that is added to the dynamic group, the FMC will push that dynamic update to the FTD without a policy deployment. So this actually allows you to dynamically add or remove objects without your involvement in it. So if someone actually, like I said, they create a server, that server is going to get added to the workloads because I'll show you in the lab, there are some queries you can do to say, hey, if the OS equals Microsoft Windows and this, or if it equals this or this, because it's an or and function, then add it to this group, add it to this connector. And then when you add it to the connector, it dynamically updates the object. And then when it dynamically updates the object, it also dynamically updates the object in the rule, because you're going to call these dynamic objects in your ACP rules. So now that, hopefully that cleared that up. If not, let me know in the comments, and I'll make another video trying to clear up at least the whiteboard stuff. But when you see it in the lab, which I'm about to get to, you will see exactly what I'm talking about. So let's go into the lab and I'll show you this really cool feature here. All right, so here we are in the lab. And obviously we've seen this plenty of times, so we don't really have to worry about this. But what I'm going to show you is the dynamic connector. So this is an integration. So you go to integration and it's right there, dynamic attribute connector. Now, what I have is 3 public connectors. I have GitHub, I have WebEx, and I have Zoom. So what these are IP prefixes behind the scenes, right? So back in the day when people used to say, hey, we need to whitelist all of WebEx's IPs, all of Zoom's IPs and stuff like that, you would have to go look at a list and say, okay, here's the IPs, and create an object with those IPs in it, and then you would create the rule. Now, the problem with this is if WebEx decides to change like a swath of those IPs, well, they don't know that rule no longer works anymore for a lot of your IPs, and nobody has time to really be managing IPs and stuff like that. Now, with this, when the update happens on WebEx side, that gets pushed automatically to this object, dynamic object, and then remove those IPs and then add the new IPs. They can add 100 IPs, they can take out, 99 IPs and only have one. It all dynamically gets adjusted, and you as the firewall administrator never have to really worry about messing around with this stuff. Again, you can do this with private stuff as well, but this is what it looks like. Now, from a connector standpoint, here's your connectors. Right now, I said I got GitHub, I got WebEx, and I got Zoom. But if you want to add more connectors to it, you hit this little plus button here, and then you can do Google Cloud, you can do AWS, CyberVision, Office 365. You do Azure Service Tags. This is the vCenter that you can get into. This generic text is if you want to subscribe to a IP prefix like updater using text, and that's usually most people are not going to do that, but it is a feature there. You can go into Azure and pull dynamic attributes from Azure. This is for cloud. Now this stuff here, I see if you have like the FTD in the cloud, this is definitely going to be something that I would use, because as you spin up different servers or different servers really, you want to be able to dynamically adjust certain rules without having to now, hey, we spun up this server. Now we need you to make a firewall rule for this or add it to the firewall rule that you're already there. You're kind of like, hey, once you spin this up, it'll automatically update in the firewall. I never even have to touch it. And you could do security group tags. Now let me show you what vCenter actually looks like. So if you open up vCenter, this is all the stuff that you would have to put into vCenter. Now you can do NXX as well, but you don't really need to do that per se. Really, you can just add it to vCenter and you're cool with that. Once that's there, now you can do dynamic attribute filters. And this is where I was saying the query of, and it's an and or function. So if you wanted to create one of these, you would say, okay, you give it a name, and then you would select the connector. Obviously, I don't have the connector. I don't have a private connector. This would be if I had a vCenter connector. And then you would say, you would do your values here. Or the connector is the OS equals this, or the IP address range is this, something like that. And then when you have that, if there's a match in that certain connector, say it was a vCenter's connector, it would automatically add that IP address into the dynamic connector. And then it will create these dynamic objects. So we go to object management here, and we go to external attributes. Here's the dynamic objects. So what you see is a whole bunch of stuff from an IP perspective. You see how I got this number of map IPs? This is all dynamically assigned by the connector. So if I went to, say, Zoom meeting, and I wanted to see the IPs that are mapped to this, here's all the IPs that are mapped to that connector. So when you create a rule, which I do have a rule for at least Zoom and WebEx, I didn't do anything for GitHub. If they add any more ranges to this, it'll just automatically add it to this. I never have to touch this, right? So this is the benefit of dynamic attributes. Now, if you're using vCenter, again, another benefit. Hey, you created this server and you want to add it to like web servers as your dynamic attribute. Well, when somebody spins up a new web server, it'll match a certain tag that's on that server and add it to the web server dynamic object. And then if you have a rule based on that dynamic object, it'll just add that IP to it. You as the firewall administrator never have to touch it. I keep saying never have to touch it because I want to really drive that home, that using dynamic attributes really prevents the issue of stale ACP rules, because you still have old information, like I said before. So what that looks like in an ACP policy or ACP, I won't say ACP policy. It's almost like saying SGT tag, right? Redundant. So you go to your policy, you go to your access control. Now we're going to go to the base policy because that's where I put this at. So if we go into the base policy, now I have two of them. I have one for Office 365, which is based on the application filter, and then I have one for WebEx and Zoom, which is based on their dynamic attributes. And now, obviously, I'm doing a trust rule because you don't really want to do SSL decryption or anything like that, because that, or any type of inspection, because that could break the uh, conference or the communication. And then you have choppy web conferences, so you don't really want to do that. But what that looks like is we edit this rule. Obviously, I got inside, the outside, and I have my objects here for dynamic attributes. So you go to dynamic attributes. Now, in here, you can pull up a lot of information, which is this stuff is really coming from my Realm integration, but we'll take off local IP. This is coming from device types, which is coming from my ICE integration. So you can do a lot. So I'm going to take off device type. These are SGTs that are coming from ICE from my ICE integration again. You can get rid of that. And then we have our dynamic attributes, which is what I'm actually doing the rule on for any changes. And once I add it to here and we say trust, we're good to go at that point, right? We're just sitting here and making sure that, hey, we're going to bypass inspection for anything that has anything to do with RevX going to certain IPs. And if any of those IPs changes, they will dynamically update and I never even have to worry about it. So that's dynamic attribute connector in a nutshell and the reason why you would do it. Again, there are public connectors, which is Zoom, WebEx, Office 365, stuff like that. And then there's private connectors, which are, could be your private AWS, private Azure, could be vCenter, NXX, all that good stuff. Again, this is a kind of a more advanced feature. Not that many people use this because they don't really understand it, and the documentation, unfortunately, is not very clear. So hopefully this video clears it up. But I can see more and more people, especially if they watch this video, especially if you share this video, I can see more people using this because it really, really, the headache of firewall rule management, this can really help. So this is Don from Padlock Technologies. Hope this video was informative. Hope you like doing this. If you like more stuff like this, because I do this cool stuff all the time, don't forget to share, comment, like, and subscribe, especially on your socials. Blast this one out, because I know a lot of firewall administrators that have secure firewalls, they kind of don't even know this feature exists. And just give them something to learn and maybe implement in their own environment. This is Don from Padlock Technologies again. Thank you, and have a nice day.